Hi, Superkit. How are you?
Very good, very well. And how are
Great.
you?
I'm well. Good to see you. Thank you for coming.
Sure. And very nice to see many colleagues here.
Yes, it's nice to see everybody back together again. I think we'll maybe wait 1 or 2 minutes more and then we can begin. Right, people are coming in. I hope that you saw we put the report up just now. It was available from 8 o'clock this morning. Hi, David and Janapisom. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Good to see you.
And Dr. Anulak, hi, good to see you. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Good to see you, Dr. Anulak. Thanks for joining.
Hi, Paul.
I think we can begin. There's a few more people coming in, but I'll let them in as they arrive. So a warm welcome to the report launch and discussion for the report Pathways to a Sustainable and Just Transformation of the Mekong Region's Electricity Sector. My name is Carl Middleton and I'm the Director of the Centre for Social Development Studies of Chulalongkorn University. First, I'd like to let you know that this event is being recorded today and also broadcast on Facebook Live. And we will run from now until noon with a break at 11 o'clock. To begin the session today, I'd like to invite Associate Professor Ek Tan Sutwatana, who is the Dean of the Faculty of Political Science of Chulalongkorn University, to offer some opening remarks. Dean Ek.
Thank you, Ajahn Kao. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Faculty of Political Science at the Center for Social Development Studies of Chulalongkorn University, I'm very pleased to offer some brief welcoming remarks. This report launch and discussion for the report Pathways to a Sustainable and Just Transformation of Mekong Region's Electricity Sector. I would like to warmly welcome all presenters, moderators, and participants to this online event. We are honored that so many participants have been able to join us today. The Faculty of Political Science is really pleased to co-host this important online public event together with the Australia-Mekong Partnership for Environmental Resources and Energy System, also known as EMPRESS. How electricity is generated and how it is assessed and governed is of central importance to sustainable and just development in Mekong region. Until present, the dominant approach to meeting rising electricity demand in the region has been supply generated by large-scale coal-fired and gas-fired power stations or large hydropower dams. Yet, there are a growing number of reasons to suggest that the current technologies and practices of the electricity sector and its governance could be on the cusp of transformation, which could result in less risk of environmental and social harm. The report being launched today contains 13 think pieces, offering a range of analysis and perspectives written by authors from academic institutions, think tanks, and civil society organizations. Each think piece contributes a layer of evidence and insight to understanding the dynamics of electricity in practice in the Mekong region. ranging from analysis on regional scales plan for electricity trade to examination of national level of power development planning and its outcomes, to local level opportunities and challenges for decentralized off-grid electricity solutions. The report as a whole is intended to stimulate public debate on the wide-ranging socio-economic and economic implications of electricity planning and practices, and suggest potential pathways forward. It is also intended to emphasize that the planning, generation, and use of electricity is as much a societal concern as a technical one, and needs to be subject to public scrutiny and deliberation, including in the context of climate change. The report being launched today is published by the Center of Social Development Study and Empress, and has been produced with a kind support of Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, provided through the Asia Foundation. I sincerely appreciate the support that has been provided, including the guidelines and encouragement of colleagues of the AFAT and the Asia Foundation along the way. The report has also necessitated the close coordination from team of both CSCS and Empress in the process of its preparation. And I would like to thank Tarek Kettelsen and his team at Empress, and Carl Middleton, Orapan Patomlek, and Keely at CSDS for their work. Lastly, I would like to thank all of the individual think piece authors who contribute their insight to make the report an engaging and timely publication. In conclusion, the Faculty of Political Science of Chulalongkorn University is very honored to co-host this important online forum today, and I would like to wish you good discussion over the next couple of hours. And thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean Eric, for your opening remarks. Before moving on to the panels with the think piece authors and the discussants, my colleague Tarek Kettelsen, who is Executive Director of AMPERS, and I would like to share some brief details on the background of the report we are launching today and some of the context and highlights. From mid-2021 until early 2022, CSDS and AMPERS collaborated with 24 researchers from academic institutions, think tanks, and civil society groups to prepare the 13 think pieces that are being discussed today. Our motivation for initiating this report was to contribute to what we consider to be a highly important public discussion on the future of electricity in Southeast Asia, including in the context of the urgent need to act on climate change. We observed that there have been several recent think tank and civil society studies on electricity transformation in the region. Electricity-related issues have also been subject to studies by academia, and they're regularly talked about also in the media and the subject of opinion pieces, both in terms of electricity planning, but also in terms of controversial projects. Numerous academic papers have been published also, for example, on the potential for renewable energy. And renewable energy industry-connected organizations are also promoting and trying to accelerate the electricity transformation process through research and policy advocacy. Despite this, overall, the debate still seems to be primarily a technical one. Certainly, electricity can be a technical matter, but it is very much more than that too, given the complexity and range of environmental and societal issues involved. For example, the introduction of renewable energy technologies and the phasing out of fossil fuels that could help mitigate climate change entails a wider range of societal changes with consequences, for example, for employment, for education, and shifts in the use of environmental resources such as land and water. The process of transformation also has implications for different groups in society who may support or resist transformation, depending on who gains, who loses out, and whether the distribution and process is perceived as fair. Therefore, we initiated this think piece report to contribute towards encouraging public discussion, given the wide-ranging social, ecological, and ecological and economic implications of electricity planning. We framed the report drawing on the concepts of energy justice and socio-technical pathways, which we provide more detail on in the introduction to the report. Overall, this framework emphasizes that electricity technologies and their innovation are always emerging from and embedded within and shaping society. And therefore, economic, institutional, and cultural factors also matter in understanding which types of electricity systems exist, including in the diverse political, social, and economic context of the region. To prepare the report, we invited researchers active on electricity issues from a variety of backgrounds. The process itself entailed a half-day inception workshop in May 2021, and then draft think pieces were prepared and deliberated at a one-day deep dive in the middle of 2021. And that was the basis of then reviewing and internally peer reviewing the draft think pieces that are in the publication today. Our aspiration was not to try and assemble a consensus report, but rather to gather diverse viewpoints on the opportunities and challenges in sustainable and just electricity transformation. However, I think it's fair to say that all of those contributing to the publication share a belief that public deliberation on this topic is of importance. Therefore, the think pieces presented reflect their ongoing original research, but we hope presented in a way that makes the work accessible and informing and stimulates public discussion. Now I'd like to hand over to Tarek.
Thanks very much, Carl, and thanks very much, Dean Ake, for the kind words in the introduction as well. So as both Dean Ake and Carl mentioned, energy transition as more than just a technical issue. To get at the non-technical aspects, the authors approach the Mekong electricity sector using a multi-level perspective on socio-technical transition. In this framework, the existing electricity regime is a socio-technical system characterized by its infrastructure, its markets, its industry, its policy, its technology, and so on. But it is also situated within the wider landscape of the Mekong society, demographic and macroeconomic patterns, political ideologies, societal values, and other features of the local, national, and regional political landscape. And the energy transition are those niche innovations that seek to disrupt the existing socio-technical regime. A just energy transition is therefore a project of disruption to business as usual in the energy sector. And in the Mekong, this is a project we found to be bounded by two narratives that seem to be in tension with each other. First, there is a narrative around the immense potential for renewable energy to decarbonize the sector and to accelerate electricity access in more equitable and sustainable ways. The second narrative reflects on the incumbent regime's resistance to this change. When you read our publication, you will see all authors reflect on one or both of these narratives in tension to different degrees. And so whether the socio-technical regime will shift or disruptive innovations will fail remains at the moment an open question. We know globally that the new capacity in renewable energy deployment has been outpacing fossil fuels since 2010. But we also know that over the same period of time, the same decade, the share of fossil fuels in final energy demand has barely changed, 80.3% in 2009 down to 80.2% in 2019. So as the authors discuss in their think pieces, a just electricity transformation in the Mekong requires us to stop, to reflect, and to rethink a number of the dimensions in today's discourse. In today's panel sessions, we frame this rethinking in three parts corresponding to the three panel sessions: rethinking narratives, rethinking electricity planning, and rethinking scale. Rethinking narratives is the first session. In policy forums and the media, a particular pathway tends to be associated with a narrative that legitimizes it. However, each narrative has a bounding and has assumptions and is inherently a simplification. Understanding transition means unpacking the narratives underpinning the energy sectors and the niche innovations that seek to disrupt it. It requires testing and questioning the validity of the claims and assumptions and rationalizations. In the second session, we focus squarely on the electricity sector itself, the infrastructure that it's built upon, the environmental and social impacts that the communities in the region are experiencing, and the political economy landscape behind the governance and business of the electricity sector. The authors reflect on how we plan growth in the sector against this wider economic, social, environmental backdrop. Last but not least, in the final session, we have a dedicated session to rethinking scale. Doesn't renewable energy transition encourage us to think bigger towards regional electricity systems or smaller towards distributed networks and microgrids, or perhaps both? I'll stop here because I'm very excited and interested to hear what comes out of the discussions. And with that, perhaps I'll pass to our first facilitator, Dr. John Daw from the Australian Embassy in Bangkok, and invite you, John, to introduce the speakers and start our discussion on narratives, rethinking narratives.
Okay, thank you, Tarek. Thank you, Carl. I hope the sound is okay. I am the invisible man for this session due to a little technical problem, but that's no matter. So greetings, Dina Ake, and good morning, good evening, everybody. Our first session has 5 high-quality participants, and we will start with an initial round of comments from 3 of the think piece authors, Courtney Weatherby, Mui Young, and Matthias Gondolf. I am inviting Courtney, Mui, and Matthias not to present their paper, but rather in 3 minutes to give us the key message in their think piece that they really want to emphasize. Next, I will invite the CEO of the Mekong River Commission, Dr. Analak Kittikun, to offer his initial thoughts and reactions. I will then return to the 3 authors, inviting you once again to connect your analysis to our panel theme of rethinking electricity narratives. Finally, I will call on Bridget McIntosh, our discussant, to reflect on what she has read and heard. Without in any way being disrespectful, I will signal to the speakers when you've got about a minute left in your time, because we all can get excited in our topic. So let's go. First up, I'd like to welcome Courtney Weatherby, the Deputy Director of the Stimson Centre's Southeast Asia Program and a research analyst on energy, water, and sustainability. Courtney, which was your think piece and what do you want to emphasize? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, John, and thank you everyone for convening this really important discussion. So my think piece was a data-driven review of renewable energy adoption around the Mekong countries, really looking at what's been going on with solar and wind since 2010, drawing on the project level data set from the Mekong Infrastructure Tracker. The biggest takeaway from my analysis is that the variable solar and wind are increasingly attracting robust investment interest around the region, but that there's very significant variance across the countries in terms of their deployment to date, and that there's still very significant opportunity for many of the Mekong countries individually and potentially as a whole to be more ambitious with their renewable energy targets and timelines for adoption. So all countries in the Mekong region are anticipating electricity demand growth in coming decades. I think to those who are living in the region, this is no surprise. And some of these countries are struggling more than others with very rapid electricity demand. Renewable energy has played a role in most of the country's national power plans over the last decade, but the emphasis on renewable energy and the timeline for integrating it into the national power system have varied significantly. Vietnam, for instance, is sort of the lead, not only in the 5 Mekong countries, but also in ASEAN as a whole. It's moved from almost no variable solar and wind in 2017 to more than 24% of its total energy capacity coming from variable solar and wind as of late 2021. So that puts it at the forefront of ASEAN, and it puts it as a leader globally. Cambodia has also moved fairly quickly from having very little variable solar on its grid in 2017 to roughly 8 to 10% of installed capacity, if not in terms of electricity used in its grid. Thailand was a very early adopter of solar in particular, bringing on thousands of megawatts in the first half of the 2010s, but its renewable energy deployment has somewhat stagnated in recent years. And then Myanmar and Laos are both relatively early in their renewable energy transition with very minimal amounts of installed capacity on their national grids. So I think when we look at the region, the successful deployment of thousands of megawatts in Thailand and Vietnam has really shown the effectiveness of setting clear national targets and providing attractive terms for investment in getting the renewable energy transition going. And yet it's also very clear that there still remains opportunity to do more, not only inside Vietnam and Thailand, but in particular in neighboring countries, Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia, which have been a little bit slower, a little bit later out the gate in terms of adopting renewable energy. There's a number of reasons for this, and I think I'll get into some of the narratives and the changing narratives that we've seen in the region in recent years. But I think that on the overall, it's clear that there's space for further ambition in the adoption of renewable energy, and that there are some successful and not so successful lessons that can be learned from Thailand and then Vietnam for the other countries in the region. So I'll go ahead and stop there, John. I don't want to hold up the conversation, but I think that's kind of a quick overview of some of the key points for my piece.
A quick but very detailed and interesting overview. Thank you, Courtney, and thank you also for setting such a good example of keeping time as we start the day. Second up, I'd like to welcome Mui Young, Senior Electricity Policy Analyst at EMBA, also a Senior Research Fellow at AIT, and a researcher at the Australia-China Relations Centre at UTS in Sydney. Welcome, Mui, over to you.
Thanks, John, and good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. And thank you very much for inviting me to attend this activity. And my think piece look at regional power connectivity in the Greater Mekong region. And the key message arising from my piece is as follows. Converting Mekong region's growing physical electricity connectivity into a region-wide coordinated electricity market is widely considered a key contributor to facilitating a transition towards a clean and sustainable electricity future in the region. Achieving this is, however, a very extremely challenging task. A first essential steps argued in my piece of addressing this challenge is to develop a wider perspective on regional power connectivity. This perspective should go beyond factors internal to the electricity industry to focus on both regulatory and institutional changes required for deeper power connectivity and the interactions of these changes with the wider context in which they take place. In my think piece, it shows that regional power connectivity is a very complex undertaking. The extent to which it can be progressed may be shaped by the pursuit of interest by a wide range of actors. The interest of these actors may in turn be shaped by ever-changing geopolitical and social-economic contexts, potentially alongside cultural and historical roots. In such a setting, a natural strategy for policymakers to promote regional power connectivity has been to remain focused on narrowly defined issues within the immediate confines of the electricity industry. These issues include, for example, inadequate infrastructure, lack of technical competence, and uncoordinated regulatory process, and so on. This is especially true when limited resources and tight guidelines combine to make broader policy debate simply impractical. This industry-centric perspective may make the task of policymaking more tractable. It can also help produce some policies that can make some initial success, but usually these policies fail to progress power connectivity to a higher level. And all too often, such policy failures are attributed to some proximate external events rather than to shortcomings in the policy approach and policy narrative perspective itself. So
1 minute, please, Mui.
Yeah, I will finish here. I'll finish quickly. So there is an urgent need to develop a wider perspective on regional power connectivity, especially considering that a few big countries, given their large and diverse energy endowment and big market size and well-developed industrial base, and these countries may be able to cope with issues affecting renewable uptake and system reconfiguration to accommodate a changing generation mix and so on. But many other smaller countries are much less endowed in this respect. they need to pursue regional cooperation as the means of securing a sustainable electricity future. To this end, a first step is to develop a deeper perspective on regional power connectivity. Thank you. Over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Mui, and we look forward to returning to you and Courtney and all the speakers in our second round. So next up, we have Matthias Gondol. Good to see you again, sir. Haven't seen you for a long time. Professor of Environmental Planning and Geography and co-director of the Global Metropolitan Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. We're very interested to hear about the think piece of which you are an author. Please.
Thank you, John. Delighted to be here. The think piece is called Rewilding the Mekong. And it's basically taking a step back and looking at the impacts of hydropower on the rivers in the basin and the potential for restoring more of the natural process. While hydropower is widely viewed as clean, and it's promoted in that way as not yielding greenhouse gases the way fossil fuels do. In fact, many hydropower reservoirs do yield a lot of greenhouse gases, which is another topic. But certainly looking at the Mekong with its flow and with its drop from the Tibetan Plateau, it has been seen as having tremendous potential for hydroelectric development. And I think we're all familiar with the long lists of dams that were identified and planned, some of which have been built. Many more are on the table. But in fact, this lists and these kind of inventories of potential dams are largely a relic of the Cold War, when there was pressure on the West to come up with alternatives to the communist system. And so a lot of these dams were identified sort of on the fly by an engineer at the US Bureau of Reclamation back in the 60s. We need to rethink all these dams. Certainly at that time, there was not the alternatives that we have today, the non-hydro alternatives of solar and wind. And when we look at the impacts of dams, they are not uniform. They depend a lot on where they're located within the river network, within the basin structure. There are certain places that block a lot of the sediment, would block more of the fish migration. There are certain places where dams are more damaging. And even if you accept a certain level of damage from dams, you could be strategic about where you place it, and perhaps you only build your dams upstream of where there is a dam already cutting off a given tributary, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, this kind of strategic planning has not been guiding dam construction in the basin. And we see that there are many dams that are in some of the worst places. And as a result, the impacts of our dams are much greater than they would have to be for a comparable level of hydropower development if we had taken a more strategic approach. If we continue with our business as usual now, the building of the dams, sand mining, some other unsustainable practices like groundwater pumping in the Mekong Delta, we will see the river system largely degraded this century. And by the end of the century, we will see the Mekong Delta slip below the sea. 90% of it will be below the sea. So we tried to step back and take a look at how we could strategically remove some of the dams, or at least add in technology to pass sediment through the dams and reoperate the dams to allow sediment to pass through. And that was basically the exercise that we did here, looking at ways that we're not proposing to give up all the dams in the basin, but identify those that perhaps are not pulling their weight in terms of the balance between benefits and impacts, and also think strategically about how we could restore some of the natural processes and connectivity within the basin.
Just 1 minute more in this round, Professor Matthias, unless you're already done.
I guess I wrapped up a bit early there, but I'll have more to say later.
Thank you, and there will be opportunity for that. Much appreciated. So thank you to the first three authors. welcome now to, I now invite Dr. Anulak Kittikun, political scientist, water diplomat, river basin manager, and the CEO of the Mekong River Commission. Thank you for joining us. And Anulak, we welcome your initial thoughts and reactions to the think pieces that you've had the opportunity to sort of browse or be thinking about in recent times. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you to Carl and Tarek for inviting me and inviting the Mekong River Commission to join this important debate. I haven't had time to read in detail the think pieces, but I'm sure they're very interesting. And from what we've heard from Courtney, Nguyen, and Matthias, there's some interesting information that is coming out already. I want to make maybe 3 points in both reaction to what I've heard and also maybe to contextualize this debate. The first is that if we look at sort of the trends of energy and population and river basin in the Mekong, and this need to both balance the need and keeping the balance, environmental balance, we can see that, for example, in terms of the trends, we're going to have 100 million people by 2040 in the basin. So that's lots of people. That has implication for energy. For example, energy is projected to increase by 2/3 by 2040. So where will all of these energy comes from? From the Mekong, a lot of hydropower are being planned to meet these energy needs, although a small percentage probably. And if you look at the Mekong, now there are about, say, 100 dams, 15,000 megawatt installed capacity. And there's plans to put in place maybe 30 more dams, could go up to 30,000 megawatt installed capacity. The projected economic benefits from all of these investment would be around 160 billion by 2040. So that's sort of the needs, and trying to meet that needs, also the potential economic benefits. Now, if you look at the other side of the coin, there's also costs. So costs we know very well from some of the speakers earlier. In our own study, sediment, for example, which is a key issue, by 2040, the worst case scenario is that we will have 97% loss to the delta from all these dams, and also sand mining. Let's not forget sand mining. And to just rescue, for example, bank erosion, you need $6 billion. And fish is very important for the Mekong, as you know. And from all these development, coupled with climate change impact, it could go down 26 billion. So that in terms of trends, the energy needs, the projected economic benefits, the costs, all of these create a very complex situation. And there's no easy solution out. So what are the options when we're thinking about energy transition and all of these things? And especially if you look at the country in the middle, such as Laos, which is a landlocked country, no access to the sea, although now they try to create various access to the sea with the railroads and roads, etc. But it's still very much dependent on hydropower exports. Just in 2020, for example, hydropower export account for 30% of exports. That's $2 billion. So how do you replace this foreign currency earning for countries such as Laos that does not have a lot of alternative? You can argue for them to look at more solar, more wind, but would that also be enough? And then another question is sometimes we ask them, are they building too many dams? Right, they have about now 50 dams and they're putting in many more. But just to put into perspective, because other countries also invite them to visit, such as Switzerland. Switzerland have 15,000 megawatt installed capacity for hydropower. If you go to Norway, it's 30,000 megawatt capacity, over 1,000 dams. If you go to Japan, it's 450 dams. If you go to Australia, it's about 500 large dams. So it's maybe sometimes it's not a question of how many dams, but what kind and where, right? So which is what Matthias is also trying to say. So in the MRC, we have a sort of a three-pronged strategy to support member countries. One is that for all the existing projects, we try our best to maybe institute a mechanism for better data information sharing. And that would lead perhaps in the future to coordinate better the operation, not just optimize for energy, but also for environment, disaster, flood, and drought. So that's what we can do. The second is for the proposed dam, for the immediate proposed dam, there's not much you can do in terms of stopping them. So our strategy is to put in the best mitigation measures, through technology, through various other means, to make sure that they're better dams than they originally were designed. And then third is this, maybe these pieces can contribute, is we starting our proactive regional planning, which is really a management intervention for the Mekong to think medium to long term. Where are some of these dams that are not immediately coming up can be better placed, and where in the basin you can put more, while then take out other things. So we're going to look at sediment transport, we're going to look at storage, we're going to look at protection of floodplains, and all of this, and water energy mix, meaning solar on reservoir, etc. So these are sort of the three things that I was thinking about when we listened to your pieces, and I hope it also maybe factor in some of the debate going forward, and trying to offer practical solutions that both meet these needs of the countries, not only for energy but foreign currency, which is, I think now it's a big topic in this country and other countries in the region, and keeping in mind these two principles of both reasonable and equitable development on the one hand, and trying to minimize transboundary harm on the other. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you, Dr. Anulak. It's a difficult and complex situation. You, as the incoming or CEO, you inherit a situation and you now have your chance to sort of push towards a more sustainable future. I think this community of practice today welcomes your attendance, and without having asked them, I think would stand ready to offer different perspectives as you move forward with the proactive regional planning phase of your work. This panel, as you know, this particular panel is to focus on sort of rethinking narratives. I think I would speak for most of the people on the call that your proactive regional planning process is a good opportunity to have a structured or semi-structured way for new thinking to be given a space and tested as to how it might sort of influence different practices going forward. So I shouldn't speak for other people, but I can't put them all on the line now. So if you don't mind, thank you, Dr. Anulak. What I'd like to do now is return to Courtney in the first instance, and then Louis, and then Matthias, and give you a second chance to make that link, if you like. You've shared with us what your paper is about. People will have read it or will be reading it. You've heard Dr. Anulak's reflections, initial reflections, but back to you and back to rethinking narratives. How do you sort of hope that your think piece would contribute to a rethinking of energy narratives across the region? Thank you, Courtney.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to briefly touch on my think piece and then also just throw in a thought that was not in my think piece, but we'll react to Dr. Anulak and also Matthias's comments earlier. So my think piece is really looking when you're talking about the renewable energy transition specifically at some of those obstacles and the changing narratives around renewable energy, particularly variable solar and wind. And I do think we've seen an evolution in recent years, a very welcome evolution in recent years among policy planners and the public conversation about the opportunity for renewables to contribute to a more sustainable future. They've been broadly viewed as a substitute for coal in particular. Obviously, this is key for countries trying to make COP26 commitments. It's key for trying to reduce carbon emissions. And that conversation has shifted from one which I think was sort of viewing the main obstacle to renewables as the price issue or the cost issue to one of integration. So obviously they are now an accepted part of the future regional electricity mix. It's just a question of which countries are being more ambitious with their targets and what is the timeline for the renewable energy transition. I would also throw out, and this is not in my think piece, but I think is reflective of our conversation here today, that there is an important aspect to consider here, which is the integration of these renewable energy technologies and policy shifts, not only as a potential replacement for coal, but as a potential replacement for hydropower, because I think we're talking about this on the call here. You know, we've heard an emphasis on sort of the importance of which dams are being built. I think as we're looking at taking some of those dams off of the future map, that there's a real opportunity to directly link the renewable energy transition and working through some of those obstacles with integration and the strategic planning for hydropower. So I do think that there's a need for that narrative to be discussed far more broadly. But I do think it's useful to consider some of the changing narratives that we've already seen around price, shifting to integration, to stability, to reliability, and how to ensure that the future electricity supply is both sustainable and green, and also meets the basic expectations of people and of an industry in these growing economies.
Thanks, Courtney. And again, you would have the opportunity, I would hope, going forward. Mekong Basin is only one part of the Mekong region, but a very important part. And at least in the Mekong Basin, there is going to be an opportunity for a next generation of conversation about how the planning, you know, what options could or should be included in the planning. So a good deliberative process, and there's good opportunity, I would expect, for you to contribute to that. Louis, could I please pass to you now, sir? Again, your piece, how does it connect to this bigger picture of rethinking narratives?
Yes, thanks, John. And as Dr. Anulak also mentioned, that the provision of clean and affordable electricity is essential for promoting socio-economic development in the Mekong region. And this make regional power connectivity even more critical because it can enable countries in the Mekong region better access to options for redressing various electricity related issues. And the current situation is like that. An industry-centric perspective dominates much of the existing debate on power connectivity in the region. Though very useful, this perspective does not consider the influence of wider contextual factors like geopolitical issues and social economic issues and so on that shape the contours of the orbit within which various actors negotiate and renegotiate the role of electricity in the regional cooperation agenda. And because of that, an exclusive industry-centric debate could obscure the understanding of the real challenge that come from the effort to deepen regional power connectivity. This also explains why, despite almost 30 years of effort, very limited progress has been made to achieve a higher level of power connectivity in the region. That's why we need to really change the current narrative to focus on those wider issues rather than just confined to the industry-specific issues. Thanks. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Mui. You are getting us thinking, and I would imagine people will be going back to sort of explore your paper in more detail. Can I now invite Matthias to have a second go And so we see the paper. How would you hope to use the ideas in the paper to contribute to practically sort of influence, well, to put your thoughts into sort of regional conversations and narrative shifting? What's your plan? Thank you.
Well, we would like our analysis to put other options on the table. I think hydropower development has been viewed as inevitable in the broad sense, although individual dams may be fought over from place to place. But trying to evaluate the relative benefits of hydropower against other alternatives, and particularly looking specifically at, as Dr. Anilak pointed out, you know, there are different impacts depending on where you are and what kind of dam. I didn't mention that, but a lot of the smaller dams are actually able to pass sediment relatively easily. Larger ones, not so. In our proposal, in a little more detail, we were proposing to either remove or avoid about 50 dams, restoring the sediment load to about 54% of the natural sediment load, which is very good compared to what we predict will be the case if all the dams proposed are built as planned and without retrofitting with sediment passage structures. We anticipate that only 4% of the natural sediment load will be reaching the delta by middle of the century. So any delta requires a sediment load to exist. Deltas are simply the excess sediment that's been brought down by a river basin and that builds up to create this land. The land is simply the sediment brought by the river. If that sediment load is cut off, the delta is doomed. And we can see this with the Mekong. It's exacerbated by sea level rise, but the basic problems are beyond simple sea level rise. So our proposal in the paper, of course, it's not the only one, it's just an illustration of how you could, by identifying some of the most damaging dams and removing those, how you could actually get pretty close at restoring about half of the natural sediment load, which would be a huge improvement over what the future now holds with business as usual. Finally, to say that we recognize that these would not be easy things to do. There are entrenched interests in the current situation. A lot of elites that benefit a lot from the current way that dams are proposed, that they're built, that construction contracts are handed out. There's a whole ecosystem around these large projects, and the people who benefit from these are certainly not going to happily give up the benefits. So we recognize that this would require a real rethinking of how to approach the rivers, how to manage the rivers, and how to equitably share the benefits of these resources.
Thank you, Matthias. I think it was an important finish to your remarks there, as we can talk about planning, but you know, we can't talk about planning in the absence of appreciation of the realities of the political economy, whereby individual energy, electricity projects sort of have their own life and aren't necessarily part of any grand plan. Now, I am, of course, going to leave a good time for Bridget, but let's hear a little bit from our colleagues on the call. I see Kun Supakit has made a comment in the chat in which he sort of speaks of efficiency needing to be sort of part of the rethinking of narratives. Please, Kun Supakit, would you like to ask a question or explain your comment? Thanks.
Thank you, John. But I will be very brief because actually there are other good questions also. So somebody already raised that is anybody talking about energy efficiency and energy saving? And I totally agree that it's maybe we focus too much on the power generation, renewable energy, large hydro or others. But energy efficiency is among the lowest cost and much less impact in all aspects. And this is essential to all countries, regardless of their modernization or developments. So even Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, and all other countries, energy efficiency is so crucial for our consideration. Thank you.
Konsupakit, would you say that energy efficiency or being more efficient wasn't part of the previous sort of narrative of electricity supply and in your own country?
I think so, and I will discuss more in the next session. But even in our discussion now, and for too many events that we may focus too much about which source of power generation that we need for the future economic growth that we forecast, something like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hannah, please. I see a comment from you. Dr. Analak, Dr. Analak we actually knew in advance he needed to move to a different space. So Tim Lee is going to take the questions later on, but let's just hold off on questions for Dr. Analak and give Tim Lee, who's on screen, a chance to sort of respond to some of those MRC specific questions, perhaps when he's giving his remarks later in the day. I think that's the only fair way to go there. Just in addition to, before I pass to Bridget, in addition to your comment on efficiency, Supakit, I would note that in my own country, for a long period of time, we were talking about coal or gas or coal. And in South Australia last year in December, it ran the whole state for 7 days, 24 hours a day. It ran on wind, solar, and battery. So transformations are underway, and the economics are now there. It's sometimes for the policy blockages to be unblocked, if you like. Look, I would rather, if you don't mind, rather than sort of throwing to the floor, I would like to give Bridget a chance to speak with us. Bridget is a very experienced energy professional working across the Mekong region. Many of you would know her through her good work with Energy Lab. And we've invited her to sort of reflect on the papers, and we're going well for time, but I'd like to pass to her now. Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you very much, John, and thanks very much for the opportunity to participate in this important discussion. Cambodia is at a very unusual situation in its energy transition at the moment. And as Energy Lab is based in Cambodia, maybe I might share on and sort of contextualize some of the work in the papers, how it relates to a country like Cambodia. With rapidly growing demand, there is a need for new electricity generation. Currently, the electricity mix is roughly half coal and oil, and the other half is hydro, with about 4.5% solar. The solar power in Cambodia is by far the cheapest. Through competitive auctions run by the electricity utility, it's now down to 2.6 cents per kilowatt hour, whereas typically coal power is around 7.5, 8.5 cents per kilowatt hour. And what we're actually seeing at the moment now is that the coal power stations have been turned off in Cambodia because the global fuel price is so high, and the power purchase agreements actually are linked in to the cost of coal. And so because the coal is so expensive, they've turned off the coal-fired power stations. Thankfully, there's enough water reserves in the hydro reservoirs meaning that there is alternate sources of electricity, as well as a new connection to allow for hydropower. But going forward, new power generation choices are essentially coal, gas, solar, or importing from neighbours. And the choice at the moment is focusing on coal power domestically within Cambodia, and also coal power in Laos, 2.4 gigawatts of coal. But given China's recent announcement last year of not wanting to support coal projects abroad, and given the fact that almost every power project in Cambodia has been financed or involved with China in some way or another, it looks like the coal projects may struggle to close finance. And therefore, relying on a plan that has lots of coal that may either be delayed or may not actually go ahead at all means that the government is quite wisely preparing what we are calling a shadow scenario, which means that looking at alternatives to what that sources of power. Australia, my final point would be that the Australian government has supported renewable energy scenarios to be developed, hour by hour scenarios, including weather data and forecast demand out till 2040. And it looks at both the economics and also energy reliability. So under all scenarios with complete meeting of reliability standards, increasing the amount of solar power and reducing the amount of coal power that is not yet built will have lower costs for the electricity system. It will also support better energy independence, which we're learning from the Ukraine and Europe is quite an important issue. So the mix would see around 25 to 35% solar power, and this would still be cheaper than the current plan that goes for more coal power. The biggest challenge for the Cambodian government is they've already signed the power purchase agreements for the coal projects in Laos. And also for the coal projects in Cambodia. So it comes down to what to do about managing delays. And Vietnam is handling that in an unusual way, which is to put deadlines on when the projects secure finance. And if they haven't secured finance by a certain date, then those projects can be either cancelled or passed over to another group. And I apologize for the music in the background.
I'm sure we're all appreciating the music, no problem. Hey, a question for you, Bridget. Would you say, in terms of rethinking narratives, that's a good expression, but how important do you think it is in the Australian context and the Cambodian context to be actually using high quality scenarios processes to try and, I suppose, provide a space for those different narratives rather than a contest of ideas, more an articulation of different scenarios? What's your hope for constructive use of scenarios going forward?
It's a really good question, John. Thank you. I do believe that narratives are very important, and I often see that different levels of and shares of renewable energy is important to consider. And the main reason for this is that a lot of people still consider solar to be unreliable and that you can't run a grid on solar. So expecting people to imagine 100% renewable energy mix is almost too far. So having scenarios that incorporate a smaller amount that increase over time allows people to come on the journey of understanding. And maybe I'd give an example that back in 2016, the electricity utility was known to say that they would not have any solar on their grid. And the ADB supported them to do a pilot project, 10 megawatt. and they learned a lot about how solar interacts with their grid. After that, then they secured a deal privately with the private sector for the next solar project. And now we have 450 megawatts of solar on the grid. So that sort of step-by-step approach really helped people feel more comfortable with it. And what we find is that when you talk in reasonable scenarios, so let's say 25%, so we can move up from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 to 25%, then people can become more comfortable with it, and then they can see the benefits as well. But I also think scenarios also help. Sorry, John, one more point. Scenarios also help to have something in the back pocket if an emergency arises. So, for example, in Cambodia in 2019, an unexpected power shortages occurred because the water levels were lower and demand exceeded expectations. If our scenarios or scenarios for more renewable energy had been done before this occurred, then it might have been, the response might have been to have sign up less coal and more of a mix. And so I do think the scenarios are important to provide evidence, but also to be ready in case situations arise, to be able to give that evidence to the policymakers. Thanks, John.
Okay, thank you for your important points. And thank you for also giving us a beautiful look at nature there. We don't know where you're standing, but it's a good place to be. So I'd promised Tarek and Carl I'd hand back at 10. It's now 10:02. Sorry about that. But thank you very much, Courtney. Thank you, Mui. Thank you, Matthias. Thank you, Dr. Analak, and thank you very much, Bridget. On the program, our colleague Lawrence Delino from the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology was listed for this panel, but I see he has arrived, but he will be sort of joining later in the program now, as we've just had to juggle a few things. So many thanks to all. That's the end of this first panel. Back to the chiefs. Bye.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you all panelists for a really engaging discussion to get us started. It's now time to move on to the second panel, which is titled Rethinking Electricity Planning. This panel is to be moderated by Dr. Rutmani Ongkasol, also with DFAT. So Dr. Rutmani, can I hand over to you, please?
Thank you very much, Carl, and good morning, Swadika, and welcome everyone to the second session on rethinking electricity planning. I'm very pleased to be your facilitator today. In this session, we will have 5 think piece authors and 1 discussant to share the analysis. We have Kun Supakit Nantawarakan from the Healthy Public Policy Foundation, Dr. Puri Sivrasuthon from Thammasat University, Dr. Apisom Intararawan and Dr. David Wood from Mae Fah Luang University, Dr. Saipar Chantawong from the National University of Laos, and Mr. Talek Kellison from the Australian Mekong Partnership for Environmental Resources and Energy System. Our discussant is Dr. Tim Lee from Mekong River Basin, Mekong River Commission Secretariat. Like you know, questions can be sent to the Zoom chat box or you can raise at the end of the sessions. All right, the first round question for our think piece will be, what are the key messages in your think piece you want to emphasize? And I would like to first invite Kun Supakit to provide his thought. Over to you, please, Kun Supakit.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are. So my think piece is around the power development planning of Thailand that cover data and analysis at least 15 years back and try to analyze to the future. One main point, the first main point in my think piece is that even though the name power development planning, but in essence, it's actually power investment planning that really focus on the investment on which power plant. So the first point is really about energy efficiency, energy conservation, demand side management, whatever term you will call it. it really the low priority in the planning, even though Thai government develop energy efficiency development plan that is the same level of the master plan of 20 years, the same as power development plan, but still the integration of energy efficiency development plan and the power development plan has a lot of challenges and more details in the paper. This may link to the governance of the Energy Conservation Fund in Thailand, that each year the fund got the budget about $200 million per year for energy efficiency and renewable energy since about 1992. But until today, the structure and policy on energy efficiency is still a lot of challenges in Thailand. Then I argue that the overcapacity of the power generation system in Thailand continuously for 15 years is a big issue from governance lens. So we build too many power plants for too fast that the demand, the Thai society do not really need it. And the overcapacity in the last 15 years is in the range of 2.5 gigawatt up to about 8 gigawatt. So we are talking about 3 to 10 large power plants that are not needed when they were built. So several large dams in neighboring countries, some coal, many gas, many fossil gas power plants that are not needed. And when you look at the growth of the power producer, it's very interesting that the state-owned enterprise, EGAT, power generation capacity remain almost the same for the last 15 years. So all the growth is actually by the private power producer, both the large power plant and also small power producer using fossil fuel. And with all these power plant projects, the Thai power sector is locked in with the long-term favorable power purchase agreement for the investor of each project. And in principle, the cost and all the risks can be passed through to electricity tariffs. So there are many influences that the private power companies can influence the energy policy and planning. And one of the channel is through the board member of each private company that comprise of some present and many old high-level governmental staff, not only from Ministry of Energy, but from different government agencies in Thailand. And when you look at the accountability mechanisms for the power development planning in Thailand, it still has a lot of challenges and not, in my opinion, not comparable to the risks of the influence, the vested interest of the private sector in the energy policy and energy planning. So a lot would need to be done in the near future from the consumer awareness raising, the one who actually pay the excess burden for too many power plants in the system. And also from the angle of climate change, that actually the existing power development plan of Thailand will actually increase greenhouse gas emission in the short term. Even though the Thai government announced the very long-term target of carbon neutrality in 2065 to 2070. So from climate change angle, it's also another, recommendation that should be utilized. And to end this, with the strong and persist efforts by different parts of the Thai society, we hope that the accountability mechanisms and structure, not only for power development planning, but also for energy policy and just energy transition in general would be better in Thailand. Thank you.
Thank you, Khun Supakit, for the key observation on Thailand power development planning. May I now invite Dr. Puri to provide her key message, please, Dr. Puri.
Thank you, Khun Ratmani, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and not yet good night for everyone in different time zones. It's my great pleasure to join you in this seminar. For my think piece, I think that my area of study is in the case of Thailand, and the electricity planning beyond electricity technology. In my think piece, I think we require electricity supply industry restructuring and a pro-competitive market liberalization in order to promote competition within the market. Thailand needs to move away from the enhanced single buyer model and allow competition in the market, both at wholesale and retail level. The competitive environment in electricity market is a necessary condition for the just transition. As Khun Supakit has said that we have been locked in with the long-term PPA. So a restructured electricity market together with the clear regulation on competition are needed in order to reap more social benefit from disruptive technology to promote a green post-pandemic recovery and renewable energy in electricity generation. We need to restructure and open up the market in order to have a new players in all of electricity value chain. I said this like what Khun Supakit has said, that we have a large power producer. They can be large, small, or even a very small power producer, but they are, most of them are the private companies. And if you look at the detail of all these companies, they are like the big conglomerate enterprise instead of the public utility, which have been capped their capacity to generate electricity. So all these big private enterprise have their own subsidiaries to invest in the small or even the very small power producer projects. And because they have been locked in with a few conglomerates, we need to open all this and create the market at the wholesale and retail level so that we have the new players, and that will help us to employ the new technology more efficiently, particularly in the renewable energy, electric vehicles, smart grid and smart meters, energy storage and demand response mechanism, and for the consumer to have more flexibility to choose over their electricity suppliers at the retail level and to control their electricity usage and cost, and to choose to be even their own prosumer at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Puri. So in addition to the plan, Dr. Puri stressed on the importance of market competition and regulations for energy transition. Next, may I invite Ajahn Apisom to provide his key message, please.
Hello, can you hear me? Good morning, everyone. Swadee krap. Our think piece, David and I, we are looking at the lesson learned from elsewhere. The title is Applying Global Energy Technology to Reduce Carbon Dioxide Emission from Thailand Electricity Sector. So we focus only in Thailand and on the carbon dioxide emissions. So already said by Khun Supakit and Ajahn Puri, Thailand has already about over 50% reserve margins. And at COP26, Thailand committed to reduce greenhouse gas by at least 20% by 2030, right? So, but our analysis, look at the previous Power Development Plan, PDP 2018, which is the document available at the time that we're doing analysis. And we found that energy sector is the most contribution to greenhouse gas. And looking at the plan from PDP, the future plan will add more carbon instead of reducing it. Right? So we found that the previous plan is not that very ambitious and not responsive to the global trends. According to that plan, Thailand will remain high fossil fuel dependency countries. And our think piece has 4 options, policy options. We consider 4 policy options. We think this proposed strategy is technically feasible, economically and socially desirable, as the world, the society value has shifted toward more just and sustainable energy transitions. And the strategy are like phasing out and replacing coal with non-hydro renewable energy, improving efficiency, especially for space cooling, increasing use of electric vehicles, and improving energy storage system and smart grid to optimize the electricity generation and distributions. And we believe that if the government pursue that option, there will be at least 50 million tons per year reduction in terms of carbon by 2030 and 130 million tons per year by 2040. However, this requires a very strong and urgent intervention from the government. Change is now hampered by, already said as well, inflexible PPA, current market structure like a monopoly structure, uncertain policy and regulation, and unclear targets. So in our paper, we're also looking at Vietnam and Germany and how they transition to a more just and sustainable. I think there is lots of things that we can learn from elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ajahn Apisom. So we have heard about plan of the sector from the 3 think piece authors, and our next piece will present a case to plan for dam affect communities in Lao PDR. So may I invite Dr. Saipar to share his thought, please.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody, and thank you, facilitator. I am Sipat Chantavong from the Faculty of Law and Political Science from the National University of Laos. Would like to share the key message of my think piece. My think piece topic about access to agricultural land for people leased from the Nam Ngiap 1 Dam in Lao PDR. So the key message in my think piece discuss about the access to agricultural land from the resettlement program of the Nam Ngiap 1 Dam in Laos. The resettlement program of the Nam Ngiap 1 Dam divide into 2 programs. The first program is going to resettlement site, which prepared by the dam developer, and this kind of the resettlement called in plan. And the second program is about affected people receive compensation, and then they can decide as a self resettlement and call the out plan resettlement. The in plan and out plan resettlement program is linked with the access to agricultural lands, because in here, I mean the in Lao PDR agricultural land is very significant to people in rural area. So this kind of land is linked to the food security and poverty reduction. That's why in the case of the Nam Ngiap 1 Dam, the group of outland resettlement people who did not access to agricultural land is facing with unstable livelihood condition. At the same time, the difficulty encountered by some of our planned resettlement people require the dam developer, I mean the Nam Nghiep one dam hydropower project, pay attention to this option or this resettlement program. In the contrasting, the in-plan people, I mean the people going with the resettlement site prepared by the dam developer, they are lucky because almost of the Nam Nghiep one dam affected people, they select the out-plan resettlement program, which means that the in-plan people can access to agricultural land and livelihood improvement was a lot of care by the Nam Nghiep one dam hydropower development project. That is my key message of ThinkPix. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sipat. And for our last ThinkPix of this round, Mr. Tarek and his team will introduce actually another angle. So I would say alternative views of planning. So over to you, Tarek.
Thanks very much, Kungair. I'm going to actually share a screen. So I'm perhaps the only one to share in this panel session. I hope. Sorry. Apologies. If it might not work, let's see. Okay. So you can see my slides, great. So I'm talking about the paper that Professor Matt introduced in the first session, the Rewilding the Mekong. But I'm going to focus a little bit more on the trade-offs, because I think that our paper is really primarily about rethinking trade-offs. And as we heard in the first session from colleagues like Dr. Anulak and others, that trade-offs are difficult and there are no easy decisions. I think we can frame out the trade-off in the Mekong region is by these two numbers. It's a trade-off between hydropower for electricity production and hydroecology of the Mekong River. And at the moment, 146 terawatt hours per year is what's being produced by the Mekong hydropower at the moment. And that is the trade-off. Part of that is that it will reduce the sediment. It has reduced the sediment load of the Mekong from 160 million tons a year to 49 million tons a year. That's where the trade-off is sitting at the moment. Of course, these numbers relate to other figures as well. You know, the production of electricity, as we heard in the first session, has very positive impacts on the economies of the Mekong countries, and it's been instrumental in the development success that the countries have experienced and the achievement of progress towards universal electricity access. And on the other side, the sediment number relates to a number of other adverse environmental and social issues that we see documented by the scientific community in recent decades. Floodplain fertility, shrinking and sinking delta, saline intrusion, drought, and so on and so on. In our think piece, we argued that the trade-off as it stands today has tipped too far beyond what is sustainable. And we set out an agenda for asking the big question, or to rethink this issue, and what would happen if we would remove some of the Mekong dams in the lower Mekong basin. Now, for anyone who has seen one of these Mekong dams, these are massive, impressive structures. They're feats of modern engineering, and they seem almost like permanent features in the landscape. But we don't have to, we can look to other regions in the world to get examples of where and when these projects have been removed. And we are seeing a growing movement, especially in North America and in Europe as well, to remove these dam structures. So for example, in our paper, we discussed the Elwha River, which is in northwest of the USA. And there they removed two large dams. 60-meter dam was the largest one. And we saw that within 5-6 years, the littoral zone, so the river mouth area, the delta area, restored itself. It returned to its original position, growing hundreds of meters in that 5-6 year period. It's possible. This is what we think the program for rewilding the Mekong can look like. And we see it fundamentally as a process of restoring the basin-wide connectivity in the hydroecological processes. So that is the sediment component of it. If you think of the Mekong fluvial estate, the Mekong River system as a sort of a glass, we can see that in the pre-1990s period, the glass was almost full. almost full to the top. We had lots of wild rivers connecting the headwaters down to the delta. In 2020, the situation had by that stage has reversed with the development of hydropower, and the glass is now almost half or almost completely empty. We have just 9% of the tributaries in the Mekong connected to the delta in downstream. If we continue this path, as was mentioned in the first session, we will see that the business as usual situation will lead to a fragmented, degraded Mekong with a collapse in sediment and ecological connectivity and major instability in the Mekong floodplains and delta. And Professor Condolf and others have just produced a paper outlining this in Nature recently. The MRC has also produced data showing that actually the sediment load could altogether disappear if the trend continues. So we see this as a decision point that needs a big and a brave decision to rethink what's possible. And we think that, yes, there is a role to mitigate sediment transport and movement through environmental flow regimes and sediment routing. That's possible to play a role. We think it's important to conserve and maintain the natural flow and sediment regime in the existing rivers. And you can see that in the bottom right, there's the green component. That's going to play a role. But we will not get to return a sustainable balance if we don't restore some of the dammed rivers to be rewilded. So in our paper, we explored what that trade-off might look like, and returning to those two numbers, we see that the reduction we could increase the sediment load in the Mekong system from that 49 million tons a year up to about 87 million tons a year. That's restoring 90% of the lower Mekong sediment load, or about half of the total sediment load, if we take this rewilding approach. And if we take this rewilding approach in the lower Mekong, we would lose 26 terawatt hours of electricity, 27 terawatt hours of electricity a year. Now that's a big number in absolute terms. That's true. But in relative terms, we can consider that to be around roughly around 10% of Thailand's annual electricity consumption, or about 1/3 of Thailand's existing excess reserve margin. We've heard already from Kun Supakit that there's 3 to 10 large power plants that might not be needed. And if we think about it in another way, that 27 terawatt hours per year is very similar to the total production from the solar systems that Vietnam has installed in the last 2 years. So within 2 years, Vietnam was able to generate this sort of quantity of electricity through solar. So we think it's a big trade-off. There are no easy solutions. There will be lots of difficult decisions to be made, but there's experience to show globally and in the region that it's possible. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tarek. And so we have heard key message from Thailand, Laos, and overall Mekong from them. The second round question will be how this analysis suggests us on rethinking electricity planning. May I start the second round again from Kun Supakit, please?
Thank you, and thank you for all the great, the other 4 great speaks of all of you. It's really great to hear all this and try to think about, okay, it's very important to rethinking in electricity planning. And from my angle, I got a few points. First, from the very technical process in the hand of just a small group of experts on electricity planning, power development planning, or so actually, how can we reach the broader stakeholder that actually involved or affected by the electricity planning? So actually, in the modern day, there are many ways that we can try to reach out. In the limitation of times, I just give some extreme example that actually today, the online game that some people, especially new generation, are playing online game. One option is that why don't we develop power development planning of a country like Thailand to be a game, an online game, that any people who are interested can play this game and learn about power development planning. How many power plants do we need, the forecast, the different options, and the trade-off between investment, the cost, greenhouse gas emission, and other things. This is just one of the many examples that we can widen the audience, the target group of the power development planning. And the second point that I want to make is that when we think about electricity planning, many times we do not pay enough attention to the issues about long-term lock-in, because when we invest in infrastructure, coal power plant, fossil gas power plant, or large hydro, it will last really long time. And in the current structure with the favorable power purchase agreement, we have to live with it. We have to pay for it for another 20-25 years. But in the present world, as we all know, a lot of disruptive technologies, not only in energy sector alone, but digital, telecommunication, transportation, and others. How can we plan electricity development in the way that is more flexible for the upcoming better options in the next 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years? And last but not least, all of this linked to the issue about accountability of the one who is doing power development planning for a country, and how can we have better accountability structure and mechanism, not only for the small group of experts or government staff that responsible and making decision for the power development plan, but the collective accountability together for the just energy transformation of Thailand and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Khun Supakit. I'm very look forward to see your suggestion come through. So next, may I invite Dr. Puri to put in your second thought about how your analysis suggests rethinking electricity planning. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I see the planning as the alternative of the market. The point is that we need the power development plan in the early stage of our economic development, because market doesn't function, or in the economic term we call it market failure. Then when the market evolve, technology allow us to choose quite a number of technology to generate electricity, or even to have the energy efficiency. Then the point is that should we move away from the planning and allow the market mechanism to function by itself? That is the key message from my think piece. I think that gradual pro-competitive liberalization efforts that together with the enabling regulation and unbundling state utilities, and further supported by the competitive wholesale and retail market, that could be an important trigger for the investment signals, and allows the country to adopt the new technology in many aspects more rapidly and comprehensively. Then if the government will revise the PDP, that would be great, because that will remove the limit of the renewable energy capacity. It is obvious that our long-term national power development plan itself act as the barriers to entry for the potential, but the small power producers. So a large amount of the capacity in energy mix is allocated to a few state-owned enterprise and a big private power producer with the long-term PPA. So let the market function, then allow them to to work and allow the electricity users to choose their own suppliers, then the government or even the regulators should promote the entry of the new small and medium enterprise, or even the community level electricity power plant. Let them enter into the electricity generation business, and that way they can trade their electricity, and the electricity user can pick up the supplier that they want, and even the generation costs and the electricity bills would be lower. And one small point is that in order to achieve that, the government need to establish the electricity, both wholesale and retail market, with the great flexibility in order to allow the competition within the market. And that way they can reduce the regulatory cost of the selection process that they usually have in order to pick up the private power producer and fit in their licensing scheme. And that will allow the competition in the area, in the particular area and in the zone. And we can use the renewable energy that fit with the area, region, or even zone that can have the electricity that fit with the resources available in the region.
Thank you very much, Ajahn Puri. Now invite Ajahn David Wood from Mefalun University to provide his view, please.
Okay, thank you, and greetings to everybody. I would like to expand on a couple of points that Abison mentioned. Our think piece focused on ways to reduce carbon dioxide emissions from power generation in Thailand. But there are also social and economic benefits, especially for the proposal to phase out coal power plants. Air pollution will be reduced, public health will be improved. And on the economic side, I think most people are aware that the price of crude oil has doubled in the past 2 years. Natural gas is increased by a factor 4, and the price of coal has increased by a factor 10. In 2020, coal was $30 a ton. Now it's bouncing between $300 and $400 a ton. This means producing electricity from coal is no longer economically viable, and investing in new coal power plants doesn't make sense. Yet, Cambodia, Laos PDR, Thailand, and Vietnam are today currently building coal power plants, and they're planning more. Planners need to rethink. My second point is on electric vehicles. Electricity planning has got to take into account electric vehicles. There's a transition going on, and the global transition to EVs may be completed by 2040, 2050. Environmental, social, and economic benefits from EVs. Tail gas emissions, so carbon dioxide, NOx, particulates will be from the transport sector will be almost eliminated, improving air quality and again public health. Some forecasts for Bangkok have said that EVs could increase life expectancy by 2 to 5 years. It's also going to impact the crude oil and the demand for petrol and diesel. This could be zero in about 20 years. And for Thailand, that could save about $50 billion a year at current crude oil. That's about 10% of Thailand's GDP, an enormous figure. However, the transition to EVs is going to require a lot of planning coordination between various ministries, energy, industry, transport, and finance. And I realize that's going to be a major challenge in Thailand, and I hope the planners are up to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ajahn David. You make a very clear point on this. So next, may I invite Dr. Sipar to provide his second round, please.
Yes, thank you, facilitator. Yes, for my case, I think that the Nam Yap one reflect the electricity planning of the government of Laos to fulfill the industrialization, modernization, and regional integration policy of the government of Laos. However, I think the electricity planning should be made for ensure of market demand, adverse social and environmental impact of the dam development. In my opinion, our planned resettlement program as offering by the Nam Yap one is quite good for the dam affected people. However, the dam developer should take care of our planned resettlement people for ensuring of the livelihood improvement of people. Otherwise, our planned resettlement program will transfer the problem from the dam development to the local authority, mainly in the village and district level, because most of our planned resettlement people are facing with kind of dealing with amount of money that they receive from the resettlement program. They cannot adjust in the beginning of the time. That's why the dam developers should pay attention to them, how to use the money or how to deal with the new environmental of livelihood, adaptation, and so on. That is my reflection on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And lastly, Tarek, please provide your thoughts.
Thanks very much, Kunge. I've got only two short comments to make, and I think the first relates to this impressive shift in the economics of the energy sector that we've heard many people talk about here. We've heard from Ajahn David about the kind of the soaring cost of coal, and from Bridget about the how cheap solar is compared to coal in Cambodia, and many other colleagues here. But I think if we want to rethink planning for the energy sector in the Mekong, we have to go beyond this kind of economic argument, conventional economic argument for which technology choice to use. And I think we have to kind of broaden it to include inside there some of those factors that are considered externalities in the economic decisions. And it's those externalities that they're difficult to work in, but we have to find a way to bring them in. And I think if we don't take the opportunity of the energy transition to bring those factors into it, we will miss a big opportunity to do so. And the second one, and then of course with our work on think piece on hydropower, that has some implications for what we talk about in our paper. The second one also relates to the efficacy of planning and decision making. We know, as colleagues have mentioned, that there are other factors that influence planning processes, political factors and political economy factors. And I think we have to be smart about addressing the concerns of those actors who are going to lose out in the process, where they have to build that into the planning process. I'm very encouraged by some of the innovative thinking that some of the banks and ADB are doing to buy out coal. I think that's it's a nascent idea, still forming, but it's an interesting idea that if we as a society value some things, like decarbonization, then we have to think about ways that we can make it more effective when we look at the interests that are involved. And those buyback schemes, I think, could be really interesting for large hydropower as well. Thanks, Kunye.
Thank you very much, Tarek, and thanks to all the piece order for their interesting thought. I would like now to invite Dr. Tim Lee from MRC Secretariat to provide his comments. The floor is yours, Dr. Tim Lee.
Thank you, Rudmani, and thank you for all panelists. I went through the think piece of the 5. I think it's very interesting. Amasi work focus we related to trading investment is our Amasi mandate. But we should understand trading investments related to power sector so that we can plan effectively. So I think the 3 paper on the think piece on the that talk about investment plan, electricity marketing, and also about the reduced carbon dioxide emissions from the power development. I think it's very good. And what I want to highlight is that planning is a process. Planning is a process that will be endless. So we have a plan, we implement a plan, and then we reassess the plan. We reflect it from time to time, and then we adjust it. So we still have something that can be adjusted. So all of this think piece should be also reflected during the implementations of the power development plan, I think. And this PDP, it's very long term. If you look, it's long term. It's 15 years. It's 2035 or 37. So it's very long. So this means that the implementations will be also reflected every year or every 3 years, and then adjusted. And as you know, that investment and technology is from time to time is advancing all the time. So maybe a technology will include also promoting EV car, which reduce less electricity, or air conditioner that reduce electricity. So demand for electricity will be reduced in 2035, for example. So the PDP could be reflected again and adjusted during the implementations. And usually, I think for plannings, they do mid planning reflection. So if it is 15 years, maybe 7 years, they could reflect on how far they have gone through their plan. And through this process, a stakeholder could engage in, could chip in, and then provide feedbacks on the implementations of the plan. And then the plans, we also could identify gaps. What are the gaps in the implementation? There, the plan could be adjusted. So I think there is still hopes for us to influence the plan in a way that we make a full engagement into the planning process. So this is very important. In this regard, my comment would be in a way that planning should be accepting participation stakeholder of wide range of stakeholders who are affected by the plan. So this is one thing regarding to the power development plan. And regarding to the resettlement of hydropower project, I think it's very good. And this is also one of the Amasi mandate that we are doing. We also review all of the submitted documents for hydropower development, particularly for mainstream dams. And we try our best to mitigate all of the impacts that are related to social, economics, and also environment. And one of the things is that also we would like to also consider investor to consider internalizing the external cost that Tarek mentions. And what does it mean internalizing the external cost? And external cost is not mentioned in the investment plan. For example, impacts to the environment, maybe too little cost have been put on the investment plan. So the profit will be high, but the cost will be on environment. So we are also working toward how to improve this internalizing the external cost on environments into the investment plans as well. So this way we have to understand how investment is being carried out and then integrated into the plan. So in this way, my CEO already mentioned to you this morning, we are conducting proactive regional planning that will also develop adaptive basin plans. So we know already that in 2040, there will be a high development of the member countries. So we have to address all of the issue of sediment loss, load loss that presented by Tarek. We well aware of this. And then in our proactive regional planning, we will assess the sediment to mitigate sediment loss in different options. For example, by looking into the design of the dams that allow flushings of the sediments from one dam to another dam during the flood season, for example, and then increase sediment load in throughout the Mekong. And we do this, we will do assessment through our planning process. And then we will also do our, we call assess regional energy water integrations options that will look into not only hydropower sector, but we will look into other alternative options, including solar, including wind. I think you already presented this morning, to have like energy mix, and then providing a kind of what is best way for the energy planning. So we will do this, and this will be by 2023. We will have some results to be shared, and throughout the process, we will also engage stakeholder in discussions of our assessments finding in our planning process, and this will be fully engaged the 4 member countries and also research institute, and as well as also China and Myanmar in the process of our proactive regional planning. And this will be conducted perhaps third quarter of this year until 2027. But we have a two-phase approach. So this is all my comments on the think piece. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tim Lee, for your thoughts and updates that we look forward to engaging with what you are telling us. With the permission from Dr. Carl in the back, I think we are okay if we end this by 11 o'clock. So I think we can still take some questions. I saw one to Dr. Puris and Phil through MRCS. If Dr. Tim Lee, you are okay to respond. So the first question to Ajahn Puri is, if Thailand energy fully based on market competition, how to avoid the energy price jump when disaster comes?
First of all, thank you very much for your question, and that is a very, very good one, particularly when we have such a disaster. To me, when I say that fully, I support the market liberalization, and definitely when there is the liberalized market and competition, then there will be some unexpected event that can occur. But how to me, if there is such a disaster, that is when the government need to intervene. It doesn't mean that the government have to intervene in the pricing mechanism all the time. But when there is the situation like a COVID pandemic, or even the disaster that you have mentioned, you can see that even in the country that there is the liberalized electricity market, the government have asked the private companies or even the public utilities to support or to help the electricity users. And number of the electricity tariff support scheme in the United Kingdom, even in the United States. So I think by that time, that is when we need the government intervention, but not all the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ajahn Puri. So Dr. Tim Lee, may I ask you the questions regarding MRC roles? The question is, given the likely co-location of hydropower dams and some forms of renewable energy technologies like floating solars, pump hydro storage, transmission infrastructures, is there a role for MRC in contributing the governance of regional electricity connectivity more broadly, like through promoting coherence or institutional linkages?
Could you repeat again? I do not understand. It's not so clear.
I think the question is there a role for MRC in contributing the governance of regional electricity connectivity, like is there an effort to promote coherence or institutional linkages?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yes, I understand your question. So MRC mandates mostly focus on this hydropower development, and it should be sustainable. And now with other sector, solar, wind is not our mandate, and regional connectivity, it's also our mandate also with the transmission. But because of we are working on hydropower sector and also in the basin related to water infrastructure, so we have to understand the like I mentioned earlier about the investment, about the trade. We have to understand about this. So because they are all have an impact on the hydropower development sector. So the reason why we do our proactive regional planning, that will cover also the connectivity, understanding on connections between energy and water sector. And this means that energy sector include the energy planning and with hydropower. So then we will investigate, do assessments on how these other sector will contribute to hydropower development, energy development in the basins, and then highlight some of kind of hybrid solutions. And the way we are doing also, we will also seeking also partnerships also with other regional bodies to do the assessment on energy and water sector. So that would be my answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim Lee. With this, and we have time constraints, so maybe we should end this session. So I'd like to thank all again the panelists for your contributions and for participants to attending and contributing to these fruitful discussions. I would very encourage you to read the full report. I really enjoy reading it, and I hope that you will find them very inspiring like I did. So now I will hand back over to Dr. Kao for the next session. Thank you and Sawadee Ka.
Thank you very much, Kunrupmani, and thank you also for all of the panelists for really clear explanations of your think pieces. And I also have enjoyed reading all of them as well, of course. We had this originally planned for a break when this was partly to be an in-person meeting, but if you need to step away from the screen, of course, it's fine. But in the interest of time, I would like to propose to move on. The third panel is on rethinking scale and design. And we have Hannah Lord from the Australian National University who will be the moderator for this session. So please can I hand over to Hannah.
Thanks very much, Carl, and thank you to you and Tarek for facilitating this very interesting discussion. I'd just like to acknowledge Dean Ake. I don't think he's still with us, but and to all the authors, discussants, and the other panel facilitators today. I'm very pleased to facilitate this discussion, and I'll ask each of our esteemed authors and discussants to speak, please, for a maximum of 5 minutes on the two questions combined together. So the first question is around what is the key message that you think that your think piece is trying to emphasize, and secondly, how does your analysis connect with the broader theme of this particular panel discussion, which is about rethinking scale and design. So I have 4 authors and then 2 discussants. And for the 2 discussants, you can provide your thoughts on the think piece summaries provided by each authors. Sorry, John, I think you're not on mute. Thanks. So I'd just like to ask initially for Dr. Lawrence Delina to start the panel discussion. He was initially slated for the first panel discussion, but will be joining our panel discussion. And I'd just like to note for all of the authors and discussants that I'll provide a warning at the 1 minute mark when there's 1 minute to go. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Lawrence Delina. He's an assistant professor in environment and sustainability at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. Thanks very much, Lawrence.
Thanks, Hannah. Good morning, everybody. Hello from Hong Kong, and of course, greetings everyone wherever you are in the world. So I was asked to actually write a think piece on China Mekong electricity grid interconnection, and of course, I really would like to thank Carl and Tarek for their leadership in ushering this important collection. So I just would like to focus my sharing into three things. So what are the impacts? What are the potential? What are the benefits? And what are the challenges of this innovation, this technological innovation, the socio-technical innovation in the energy system in the region? So first, about the impacts is that it will most likely, if achieved, deepen the economic and institutional integration across the Mekong countries, plus China. The second impact is it can address supply reliability in the Mekong countries, and which is also very important in achieving impact 1 on economic and institutional integration. And impact 3, and it's been a recurring theme in today's event, is that when you have China and Mekong interconnecting their grids, you can assist, that particular innovation can assist in energy transition, especially in the Mekong. So the China export to the Mekong is one of the many imaginaries or visions from China looking outward to export its renewable energy extra or excess to other countries, to other grids. So I investigated in this think piece how that particular interconnection can actually matter for the Mekong. So the Mekong is very important for China, largely because it's geographical neighbor in the south. So we're looking at the potentiality of China exporting its excess renewable energy, particularly hydropower from Yunnan province, using ultra high voltage lines to its Mekong neighbor. So that's basically what I am looking at in this think piece. So looking at the challenges, of course, they're very related directly to the potential. So Mekong countries also possess vast renewable energy potential, hence the question, why import? Why the Mekong countries need imported energy from China? The second is, of course, the hydro orientation of the China-Mekong interconnection, and this has been partly explored by Tarek's talk earlier. There's also this question with regards to the heterogeneous energy regimes in the Mekong countries. It's been explored largely by some of our colleagues from Thailand. There's also this important question, social questions, political questions about trust levels with China and issues with regards to sovereignty and national security context. So when we rethink about scale and design, this proposal is really about thinking big. And with centralized large-scale infrastructure, there are attendant challenges and barriers. So there is that question of how we can actually make sure that ordinary lay people living in the Mekong can participate in the energy transition when you have already this large-scale infrastructure fitting or filling in the gap. So in closing, the key takeaway and of the think piece is that the Chinese vision of interconnecting its energy systems with the world, starting from its southern neighbor in the Mekong, has huge potential. There's a huge potential in it economically, and of course in terms of energy, assisting in energy transitions. But there are also national and regional constraints, and there are also barriers in terms of the local, not only of the engineering and the technological, but also of the social, the political, and of course the ecological. So addressing all these constraints and challenges is very important if China has to make an impact in terms of interconnecting its grid and exporting its excess hydropower to its other neighbors in the Mekong. That's it.
Thanks very much, Dr. Lawrence. I would next like to invite Mr. Udon Han, who is an independent analyst and consultant working in Cambodia.
Thank you, Hannah, for giving me the floor, and thank Carl and Tarek for arranging this very important launching think piece. Well, my think piece that study a community owned model as a key toward just transformation in Cambodia. The key message being raised here is that it is crucial to have a more integrated electricity regulatory policy and practice, especially to properly connect the existing community renewable energy model of project into the state electricity operation. Because what I have seen in my study, there are existing renewable energy at the community level at various geographic area, mostly have to reach communities that have been filling the gaps of electricity shortfall, where the central grid are unable to reach out, but they are not necessarily considered in the state electricity mission in reaching out to the last mile population. Instead, the existing off-grid or mini-grid system in the community are thrown away due to the arrival of the state central grid. That's what we have seen quite frequently. So if the state can come up with the right electricity policy that can integrate the many small-scale community renewable energy projects or systems, they don't have to double the effort or resource to build an entire electricity infrastructure to provide the electricity access, as there have already been a lot of investment either from NGO or development partner or the individuals, private sector in the community themselves. They already invest into the off-grid system that enable community themselves to have electricity access with minimal environmental impact, and they can maximize the local community involvement, and over time seeking responsibility to handle the system by themselves. So I would continue in the next round question, in terms of scale and design. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to invite you to continue and answer the second part of the question at the same time. And we'll do because we have 6 speakers as part of this panel discussion. So we'll do everyone speaking on both that first question and that second question together. So if you would like now to speak about rethinking scale and design, please go ahead.
Me, right? Okay, cool.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, we have seen that in terms of scale, the stereotype of the energy planner and practitioner, usually they're thinking about the large scale energy supply, and that's why there have been a number of power plant, large scale power plant like hydro or coal have been built. However, for example, in the case of Cambodia, they still have unsuccessfully met their own commitment to provide electricity access, as they promised to provide 100% of villages with electricity access by 2020, but they couldn't do that. And I think this is not only for Cambodia, but country in the region may have gone through that experience as well. So, for example, if in the case of Cambodia, more than half of the electricity infrastructure is provided or supplied by the private electricity enterprise, and usually as a business-oriented utility, you are thinking about benefit, and you're not going to go to area with low density or hard to reach community. Therefore, those imagine mountainous or island area community will still be ignored by the state central grid. At the same time, in my SINCPI, I have seen, for example, the solar battery charging, for example, one of the cases. So they have already have themselves in having access to the electricity, while the state central grid, they haven't reached out. So if there is a right technology and policy, the state can just build on the existing renewable energy system. They are small at the moment, but they can gradually scale up. And you already have in terms of design, like how the community can work together, community and NGO or development partner and private sector, they have already there. Although they're not, there are challenges, but there are some good practices, how people can work together, come up with the collective action in order to resolve their electricity demand. This is could be something that significant for the state electricity policy maker to think about, and you know, instead of double the resource, they can think about building on from this system, especially they are renewable energy. The bottom line is that there will be impact, but it will be in a minimal scale. So I mean that this is a very good lesson learned that for people to take away. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hannah, I think you're muted.
My apologies. Thank you very much, Carl. Thank you very much, Mr. Udom. And next I would like to invite Dr. Noah Kittner, Assistant Professor at the Department of Environmental Science and Engineering at the Gillings School of Global Public Health at the University of North Carolina. Thank you very much for joining us so late in the day for you. And just to apologize if I wasn't clear earlier, if you could please speak on both questions, what your think piece said, and also what this means in terms of rethinking scale and design in 5 minutes. Thanks very much.
Okay, great. Thank you all for having me. It's really nice to talk with you all today. My think piece is focused on emerging energy storage technologies and their impact on the scale and structure of the power trade agreements between Thailand and Laos. So the think piece covers a variety of energy storage technologies that have not yet been adopted widely across the Mekong region, or in Thailand and Laos in particular. These include lithium-ion batteries, flow batteries, pumped storage hydropower, hydrogen, and thermal energy storage technologies, which are all relatively new globally in terms of their adoption. But what may have some serious implications for the Mekong River is that as countries such as Thailand and Laos adopt new energy storage technologies, they would have the ability to manage peak demand in new ways, and also consider how the scale of the power generation systems, which has largely been focused on large gigawatt scale thermal or hydropower plants, to transition to potentially smaller, more modular types of electricity infrastructure. So that could include distributed storage in the distribution grid. It could also include storage at the transmission level that could reduce electricity needs at peak times, which could be a strategy to lessen the impact on air pollution from gas and coal-fired power plants. But it could also offer economic opportunities in terms of arbitrage to sell electricity when the price is higher, buy it at low prices for different countries across Southeast Asia that are connected in the grid. And so I think with many of these new technologies that have not yet been deployed at wide scale, there's going to be many implications technologically, economically, and also socially in terms of how it can affect the development of new energy projects for communities. So from a technological perspective, just briefly, I would say that there are ways to make electricity grid more efficient through electricity storage, and potentially lessen the need for as much new transmission lines, which have been planned to accommodate regional power grid systems. On the other hand, there may be ways that storage systems could exacerbate some of the inequities we've seen between different power trade agreements where, for instance, between Thailand and Laos, there are economically favorable long-term 30-year power purchase agreements where Thailand is able to get very low-cost hydropower from Laos, and that can be considered positive or negative depending on different viewpoints economically, but in general, there's a disparity between who is really profiting from much of that electricity generation. Storage could have a role in levelizing that some way. So, so those are kind of some of the key aspects of this. And additionally, I would say that because energy storage technologies range in scale from kilowatt scale to megawatt or gigawatt scale technologies, we could see changes in the distribution grids all the way to improving grid efficiency and resilience in the centralized systems. So I think this will be a very important part of the energy transition across Southeast Asia. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Noah. I'd next like to invite Ms. Hati Honghai, who's a project officer with the GIZ Energy Support Program. Thanks very much, Ms. Hai.
Hi. Yeah. First of all, thank you for giving me a chance to share my thoughts about for myself, I think is my writing piece is built on a specific model that is the good practice in Vietnam to see how to provide the electricity, also the clean water to the remote village. And beyond that is when we develop some implication for the further government policy in terms of to achieve the universal electricity as well the water in Vietnam as well in another countries. Yeah, you may know in most of the country in the Southeast Asia as well as in Vietnam, most of the household already access to the electricity, but some of them they still have they are living in the remote area, in the isolated area, or in Iceland. So with the high potential of renewable energies, I think it's going to be a really potential solution to provide electricity to that kind of group, to provide electricity, also the water. In Vietnam, it's quite, how can I say, it's quite challenging when the government approach is quite traditionally and technically when they try to provide electricity by the centralized solution, and to provide electricity and the water is going to be independently. It haven't combined together. And to promote the more efficient of the resource, I mean, is both the people, the human as well, the capital resource. The solution to hybrid solution, for example, in this case, the solar hybrid system is combined with solar PV as well as the storage with the battery that could help to provide the water and electricity to the group in the central Vietnam. And I think, beyond this one, I also take the lesson on in the message about the business model to how to make, how to ensure the sustainability of the community model. It could be have the contribution of both the government side, both the community side, also the public. For example, like this, the government could be provide the guideline, provide the guideline, also the incentive for the community, the local participant in that way to ensure the operational and maintenance of the project and keep the project work well during their lifetime to meet their demand. And also another contribution here is from the private who will contribute about the investment cost, and another source of the investment mobilization. And beyond that kind of, I think that's a good practice we, when I was looking for, is really thinking about the broader picture. Like in the future, if the government even just left a small amount of the household who have access to the electricity and the water, if they want to achieve the universal goal, so they should be combined. First of all, they should be combined both the target with the providing electricity and water together to that kind of community, the remote and the island community. That will be really help to the funding efficiency. The second thing is I come up with by looking for that kind of the specific model is like, yeah, that's really important to see the role of the different stakeholders in that kind of story, to not just only the government, not just only the community or the private. We need to set a platform where they can see clear role, the contribution of different stakeholders, where the government will be take advantage, will be play at the managing as governing to the system to promote, to set the policy and the space to promote the community system, especially to in the renewable energies community initiative. And I think another thing is the role of the public. Here is, I mean, the community, here is, I mean, the local authority and the local people, where they can be join in develop to design their own system. They're going to be operate, they're going to be maintaining that kind of system. They're going to be have feeling like they are the owner of the model, and that's going to be have to keep it in have them to keep in mind that they are in the center of the heart of the solution. And lastly, I think is the consumer other part, like for example, the donor, for example, the private sector, because many community, many government, they have struggling into mobilizing the investment source to the kind of solution, bring the solar or the wind system or even the microgrid to the remote area is very costly. So I think it's a need to have some business model to see how they can be contribute on that thing. And it's just not in the lesson learned for Vietnam. I think it's also the good lesson for the other country in the Mekong region. So to rethinking about how they can achieve to provide the electricity and the clean water for all the population. Yeah, that's all my sharing.
Thank you very much. Hi. Thanks very much to all four of our authors. I'd now like to ask two discussants to provide your reflections on the discussion so far in the context of rethinking scale and design. So firstly, I'd like to invite Ms. Socheta Sim, who's the Regional Program Manager with Oxfam, to speak.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and also to the organizer for inviting me. Let me congratulate to all the writer of the different think piece. I haven't the chance to read all, but I certainly read some that is part of this panel. And I also want to say that it's a great learning for myself. I'm not having a background in this area, but I'm trying to contribute my thoughts from the perspective of the community angle, especially focusing on seeing the think piece from Cambodia and from Vietnam that were last year. So as we know that the energy use is embedded in so many aspects of our life, from how we cook to how the home is heat and light, and the transportation that we use, the food that we eat, and so on and so forth. So the scope and the scale of the transition of energy will inevitably entail economic, the cultural, social, as well as technological changes. And I think when we discuss on scale and what the plan of energy planning should look at, important question probably is to ask scales of expansion for who, and this have an implication on how energy planning will take place, because as we have heard from the think piece, both in Cambodia and also in Vietnam, those often hard to reach or the last mile community. They are in island in the remote mountainous area, so the investment from the centralized energy planning in trying to have the infrastructure to reach them will be a very key consideration. So we need to consider what kind of scales and options that is suitable for them, and how we can engage different members in the community as the end user in the process of planning, in the process of design, operation, and maintenance of those. Because I think, as the case or think piece from Cambodia suggests, it can change when the arrival of national system coming into play. When we have the scale that suit to the needs of the local community, we have seen evidence from the piece that it have a lot of benefit for the community, health benefit, education benefit and outcome, and also increase of income, cost saving, and so on. So I think when we discuss on the scale, what might work for the community who are in the remote and hard to reach by the national grid, there are a few important features that we could draw on. And I think this point arrived from a particular piece that Oxfam and Ampere colleague, a few of our team, as a writer, he also engaged in this process, because we are looking at models of community renewable energy that might suitable for meeting the energy need. And we're looking at some countries such as Cambodia, Vietnam, and Myanmar, where some models have shown the evidence that it's working. So it is important that the community energy system develop and deliver by community and for the benefit of the community, and that the system should be distinguished by the level of engagement that they have in the decision making, in the way in which it is governed, the governance structure and the management of the system of renewable energy, and how it benefits at the local level, and that when national grid connection come and it's ready, I think that it can be time for community to consider that. So for the remote community where scales are an important consideration, I think it requires substantial collaboration and cooperation between different ministry, development organization, as well as local partner. And I think Hai has just mentioned about the importance of those different stakeholders and the role that they can play together with the community. And the clear role and rule of engagement of this multi-stakeholder is important in the planning, operation, and the maintenance of the system. So I will leave it there first, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sacheta. Finally, I'd like to ask Mr. Namlay, who's an energy advisor with the Partnerships for Infrastructure program and with EY.
Hi, thank you. And I thank you to all authors. I'd also like to offer my congratulations to Carl, Tariq, and everybody involved in what is a really important piece of work. Particularly like to express my appreciation for sourcing an intentionally wide range of views, which is quite unique, and really appreciate it from somebody who is relatively new to energy issues in the Mekong. Thank you also to for everybody for the opportunity to share my thoughts in front of such an esteemed group of researchers, professionals, and thinkers. So rather than focus on anything specifically mentioned, I wanted to share some reactions and observations more generally based on two aspects. That's one, somebody with an economics background, and also somebody who has worked in central government energy planning and regulation roles in the past. And then secondly, observations about how the papers and a lot of the discussion today have resonated with me about how scale has been misapplied beyond what its traditional economics concept should be. So scale is a very important tool and concept in conventional microeconomics, which is underpinned by the premise that scale, or doing larger or doing more, is advantageous because it enables a reduction in costs. So very fixed and rigid definition. And from my perspective, it's useful in a couple of contexts, which is around contexts which are quite simple, really focusing on just one dimension of benefits, in this case, cost reductions or efficiencies. It's useful in a context where things are relatively static. The concept of economics or economies of scale aren't really intended to be dynamic. And then the third component is it really holds when there is a relatively high degree of clarity and certainty. So in my experiences working in central government planning, and I think with most authors, and particularly Udong's important work in the government energy sector planning context, I feel that the concept of scale has been perhaps misapplied. It's been championed almost exclusively in energy planning as the most important factor. And I think the way that my main takeaway is that it's a really good illustration of the importance of recognizing that traditional disciplines like economics can and should only provide one tool in a policymaker's toolkit. In energy, without re-prosecuting the point, scale has been championed when perhaps it's not appropriate to do so, given the energy transition is the exact opposite to those three factors I mentioned earlier. So it's not simple. There are many dimensions of energy beyond just costs. It's not static. The sector changes so quickly, particularly in recent years, and the road ahead with such rapid developments in technology. And there is quite a bit of uncertainty in pretty much every aspect of the energy sector and market. Similarly, the concept of scalable has also been championed. And one question that I would proffer to the group is, are there limits on the extent or the size to which individual solutions can or should be scaled up? Moving on, so if we accept that the premise that scale might need to be reconsidered, I think the second challenge I'd like to offer is around what's the pathway that we take from here, given we're not starting from scratch. Ideally, we could start from a blank slate, but we don't have the luxury, and the reality is identifying how to work with historical decisions, structures, and arrangements. And if there's one thing that's come through really clear, is that the energy transition doesn't mean the same thing to all people, nor is it static over time. We're all at a different starting point. We want to get to a different end goal. We face different challenges and barriers. So in summary, there's clearly a lot of issues to work through, but it also presents quite a few interesting opportunities, and particularly about how trade-offs are managed. And as Tarek has mentioned, managing trade-offs is not an easy decision. And it's essentially about working with a few or many objectives or principles which are competing, contradictory, and determine which objectives and principles we place a weight on. There's no neutral way to encapsulate the challenge ahead about how to manage trade-offs, then how policymakers and the sector addresses the questions about how to better interpret and better manage the concept of scale in the energy sector. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Nam, for that very interesting presentation to wrap up the presentations from our authors and discussants. So we now have about 10 minutes available for question and answer. So I'm just going to have a look through the chat. I think in terms of perhaps providing a synthesis of some of what we've heard in this particular panel discussion, it strikes me that there are really important questions around who, for whom and how energy systems are designed in the context of the transition. And we have this as as Nam said, competing visions perhaps between large scale systems and the distributed systems design of more sort of smaller scale or microgrids. And I think there is, from my perspective, I'm coming from a political science background, I think there's really important questions of who benefits and the distributional effects of the different scales and designs of electricity systems. And I think also going to Noah's point, the technology mix is very important. I think there's also important questions for policymakers around how to incentivize investments in storage and other types of technologies that will be part of the mix. And finally, I think the point that Hai and Socheta made around the interaction between different stakeholders, communities, private sector, the state, international organizations, that's going to be critical. So I think one question I'd like to start with, and then I'll have a look through the chat to find the other questions, is just, I suppose, for Hai and for Udom, when we talk about, your piece is both focused on distributed systems in remote and rural areas. I'm coming from Australia. I'm sitting in Canberra at the moment. And in Australia, we've had a really large uptake of PV solar, rooftop solar in urban communities as well. So I'd just like to, I suppose, get your reflection on whether this scale difference that we're talking about from utility scale through to micro or distributed solar, is that just an urban-rural divide, or is there ways of thinking about distributed solar in non-rural and remote contexts as well? And please just jump in.
Just thank you for the question. I think it's for myself, not for myself. I think it's from more specific in Vietnam, and I think it's just, and specifically for the solar PV technology. I think it's not just only for the rural. In Vietnam, when we will have, in last few years, when we have the feed-in tariff mechanism, the government to try to promote the rooftop solar, so it's led to the booming in the solar installation. Not just, it's mostly is in the urban area, because with really attractive mechanism incentive, the urban, when they have they have more benefit in terms of the investment cost, and they have a lot of chance to do that. So it's really important. And they also, the people would have the ability of availability of the investment, they have a knowledge and experience. At the urban area, they really move forward to install the solar in their own home. But that's because they have another benefit. But for the rural, I think they need, as I proposed in my team speech, need to kick off some incentive or mechanism, the support from the government and another stakeholder to help them, because they have some disadvantage to set the technology, the new one. I also want to highlight that in Vietnam, right now we have a lot of fossil fuel, the coal power plant in the power mix. And we also, the government in COP26, they also state that they will be going to phasing out coal and achieve the net zero by 2050. So the increase of the share of the solar or even another renewable energy technology is really important. It's not just in the big scale, the utility scale, it's also the community, the small scale. It's to help to achieve that kind of goal. So I think, by balancing to achieve that kind of goals, so both the utility and the small scale should be considered in the further government document to approach and achieve the national commitment.
Thanks, Hannah, for the question. Yeah, there could be other reasons in terms of rural and urban divide for the PV rooftop. Some of the things that I could echo on that point is that, in Cambodia, we have the subsidy from the rural electricity program. Suppose I would say this is the government one, but actually funded by the EDC, the electricity to Cambodia, the state utility. We do have this subsidy for rural area, but it's not only that the state provides this, but also there are solar PV is sold everywhere, and then some have different quality or poor quality. So when one household, imagine they install and they see a problem, then the issues spread very fast in the community, and then it causes a lack of confidence. The other thing is the complexity of the technology. When it have a malfunction or run into a technical problem, the distance, from their house to where they can fix it, it also matters. Then the other thing is, I have met with some rural community. The information about the subsidy from the state is important. Not everyone know, not every rural household know that, and even they know it, but they feel like it's a bit bureaucratic to have that access to that subsidy. Then the complex technology, the bureaucracy things that make people hesitate. They will not see the difference. There has to be information sharing or education around this technology as well, and we don't see enough that in our country. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. I think we've probably got time for 2 more questions. There's one from Wayne in the chat, which I might direct to Nam. So Wayne asks, the economics perspective for energy policy is understandable, but the key issue here might be more about how policymakers can better cost in externalities such as social equity and environmental and ecological values. Nam, are you happy to take that question?
Absolutely. It's as a comment, wholeheartedly agree with that. If there is a specific question, you're welcome to hear it, but certainly agree with that. And I think that's one aspect of the journey that energy policymakers around the world are certainly trying to grapple with. It's certainly not a simple task, but I think the broad rationale is something which is important if it is to be able to put all types of options and fuels on an even keel. If this happens, once this happens, certainly do agree that that's probably the right tool, the right journey for better decisions to be made. Absolutely, in summary, certain full costs are not being adequately recognised. Even if they are recognised, there's some challenges about how to collect the information to consistently record them. And then even if you have the recognition and tools, there's a question of whether it will be consistently applied and practically considered on a day-to-day basis. So I certainly agree with those sentiments.
Thanks very much, Nam. In the chat, there's quite a bit of discussion about NOAA's presentation on storage. So I suppose I would ask a question to NOAA, which is just around how do you think investments in storage can be incentivized? And is there a question of scale also at play in the storage question, in the storage debate? Is it there's one suggestion here that storage is struggling at the moment to be financed at scale, but I would welcome your views on that. Thanks.
Yeah, so I agree. I think there are ways to incentivize storage, and it could be done at different scales or by different institutions. It could happen through government investment or private sector investment, and also I think depending on the technology, there's opportunities to influence more community scale microgrid systems or larger utilities systems. In terms of achieving economies of scale, I think there's a ways to go. I mean, there haven't been so many large examples in Southeast Asia yet, but I mean, I think that there are a lot of reasons why storage may change the scale and shape of the grid, and it could be with social environmental benefits, and it could also come at a social or environmental cost if not managed appropriately.
Hannah?
Yes.
Yes. I have a point related to this issue exactly, and I can also try to link to another interesting question about the role of the private sector in driving clean energy also. So before I raise my issue, there are many interesting information and discussion in the chat, and I hope we can continue this kind of interesting discussion in one way or another. Yes. So the main in my think piece is also addressing this issue about intermittent of renewable energy and storage, because you know the main arguments against renewable energy previously is it is expensive, and then the argument is not worth anymore. So a kind of the last frontier of the argument against renewable energy is only intermittent. And many think about this issue as the coming of storage, which is important, and I totally agree with many points that Noah already raised. But I want to emphasize that apart from storage technology, there are many other options for the power sector development to have more intermittent renewable energy, including different kinds of technologies and management that I will not go into details now. But the experiences from Thailand provide very interesting point, because in my think piece, I also cite one good report that International Energy Agency did the study together with EGAT of Thailand about the flexibility of the grid in Thailand. And the result, the finding is really important to share with all of you, that there are many options available, but with the lock-in, with the long-term power purchase agreement, and also the long-term fuel supply agreement with the coal, with the fossil gas and others. So this lock-in long-term agreement make all the available options for the grid in Thailand to accept much more renewable energy and economically feasible. There are options, but because of the ongoing planning and development practice, so Thailand is locked in with this, and that we cannot move forward in the new direction. And this not only Thailand, as we build several more large hydropower in Laos to export electricity back to Thailand. So this is a very important issue to share. And I can link this incentive structure that, okay, the Ministry of Energy and the electricity utilities in Thailand may not have the right incentive structure to pursue the more equitable and sustainable development of the power sector. But the private sector have a big role to play, because apart from private sector in energy businesses, there are so many other businesses already in Thailand that proactively driving clean energy, you name it. real estate, retail market, telecommunication, technology businesses. So all of these proactive businesses can be a big force for the government to move forward with the clean renewable energy. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Super Kid. I think that's a nice way to conclude this panel discussion. And I think it really, what you're saying links back to the comments from Carl and Tarek at the opening around the importance of not just looking at the technical issues in this space, but also understanding the politics. And I think that's might be a nice way to segue back to Carl and Tarek to make some concluding remarks.
Great, thank you very much, Hannah, and a big thank you to everybody for this discussion. It's been really rich and fruitful. I have a difficult job to do now, which is to kind of find a way to summarize some of the key points that we've been discussing and to put a bit of a story together to it. So I think, as we said in the beginning about narratives, they're all bound by assumptions, they're bound by a necessary simplification. So apologies, I will be having to kind of shorten things to come up with this summary, and I won't capture the full and the rich discussion that we had. So just in the sake of time, a bit of a summary. So I've structured it in terms of 10 points, and 10 points that direct us towards how we might think differently about the power sector. So the first one that came up was about thinking together. So in some of the discussions, we saw that there was an immense potential for renewable energy in the region, and that there are already successes in some countries like in Thailand and in Vietnam, which Ajahn Apisom and Courtney both pointed to. So sharing these lessons and thinking about the transition together can help countries to achieve this. The second was about thinking integrated. So we saw that the energy transition renewables could help us reduce fossil fuels, but it might also play a role in helping to reduce the need for new hydropower as well. And integrated also means energy and water together. We heard from Ms. Hai that there can be ways to solve both the energy and the water access issue together. We thought the third one was around thinking about demand. So energy efficiency seems to be something that's not often talked about and a bit more silent in the discussion than other kinds. And we had some examples from the Thailand situation where actually there can be a lot of savings or a lot of contribution to decarbonization coming from energy efficiency. We've heard also about informed thinking. So there was some discussion from Bridget and colleagues around scenario planning and how this can help to turn a sort of discussion about opinions and ideas into kind of one of informed deliberation. We heard a little bit about thinking efficiently. So there's a lot of excess in the Thailand context. There's a lot of excess capacity that's within the Thailand system, and how best to kind of plan and to utilize that is something about the efficiency in how we plan our systems. We heard about thinking long-term as being important, so that decisions in energy can have long-term implications in terms of PPA structures or the infrastructure that's built. And these need to be factored into the planning process. Is the energy system we're planning today really going to be the one that we want in 20 years' time? Okay, there was also one about thinking internalized. Phrasing is not quite right, but the intention here was, and I think it's come up a number of times, is that actually there is more in the planner's toolbox than just economics. And that was, I think, mentioned by Nam and colleagues, and that we have to bring in some of these externalities around social and environmental equity into the planning process. We didn't come up with all the solutions on how to do that, but there was some good discussion at least to start that thinking. Then we had a discussion around thinking big. So there are, from an energy transition perspective, there is a benefit to think broadly on the regional scale and to maybe connect China and the Mekong and use some of the excess electricity that is in China at the moment. And then conversely, we were taught also to think small, so that there is an efficiency in in terms of speed and cost and using mini grids to get electricity to very remote and rural areas, and that and some benefits around that's kind of small decentralized scale as well. We were encouraged at the very outset to think quickly by our colleagues from MRC, who pointed out that actually energy demand is continuing to grow and we need these solutions pretty quickly. And I think last as well from MRC colleagues, we were encouraged to think a bit bravely, because there are no easy solutions in this, and we're going to have to think in ways where we fully understand the trade-offs, the winners and the losers in these kinds of decisions that are being made. That's my summary, Carl. I might hand over to you.
Oh, sorry, I was counting to 10, sorry. Thanks, Tarek. That was a really excellent summary of the meeting. So for my couple of minutes, just to wrap up, I just wanted to add a couple of extra thoughts, not quite as systematic as Tarek's 10 points, but maybe just to sneak them on the end as 11 and 12. Because one of the things that I feel that's been interesting to me in the discussion today and the whole process of creating the think piece collection has been to kind of ask the question of, well, what actually is electricity? Like, for what purpose is electricity? So I think, in the discussion we've had today, it's kind of been revealed that there's kind of a dominant narrative that electricity is really tied to economic growth, or is a part of that economic growth. And I think some of the think pieces in the discussion today have also pointed towards how that narrative has been become dominated perhaps by industrial or at least large-scale economic interests. But I think probably another way to think about electricity that some of the think pieces have drawn out is how electricity is actually used for different purposes. And maybe even in Hannah's wrap-up after the previous panel, it kind of points towards the electricity from a political science perspective can also, for example, connect to questions of distribution, not just in terms of who can access electricity, but who benefits from the types of things that electricity are used for. So in other words, electricity can be used or is actually used for energy intensive industries that tends to actually concentrate the benefits of electricity. But it also is used in other types of more maybe societally distributed things that are valued, both in terms of household services, as well as powering public services as well. So I think to me, that's quite an important part of kind of reframing narratives, in my opinion, that we need to kind of see electricity in different ways, not just as the flow of electrons or its economic value. And I think that kind of connects to some of Tarek's concluding points about emphasizing as much about the demand side of electricity as well as the supply side. But I would say even moving beyond thinking about demand side management and energy efficiency and actually saying, well, what is it that demand is? And how can that demand be rethought? Like, what are the societal values embedded into demand that makes us value certain forms of electricity? I have some other notes, but in the interest of time, I will wrap up. The only other thing that I wanted to draw attention to, though, that I've been very keen on in the whole process of supporting these think pieces being produced is the value of different types of knowledge in thinking about electricity. At the beginning of this session, there was kind of a starting point that electricity is often seen as a technical concern, and it's associated with a certain type of technical knowledge that becomes embedded into the planning process and kind of dominates what knowledge is most important in planning. But I think the range of writers that we have amongst this group and the diversity of discussion that we've had today really points towards the importance of plural knowledges. So whether we're talking about the academic disciplines, so political science, sociologists, anthropologists, and so on, but I think also beyond that, like practical knowledge and situational knowledge that kind of reveals the impacts of some types of electricity pathways, both in a positive sense and a negative sense. We've heard solutions that have had very positive solutions, positive outcomes, and also those that can create harm. And I think all of those types of knowledges need to be assembled together when we think about electricity, the future pathways of electricity in the region. So to me, then it kind of shifts the debate from just being about electricity planning alone that can only accommodate certain types of knowledge production into societal debate about the futures of electricity and trying to connect that in turn to other important societal discussions like the impacts of climate change or questions of democratization, the role of civil society, transparency, accountability, those types of societal concerns. So I hope from my perspective that in a modest way, this report has contributed towards that type of electricity framing as well. As a final point that I'd like to make, I really want to share a few thank yous on behalf of perhaps Tarek and I through this process. So first of all, I'd like to thank Tom Park and Benjamin Zawalski at the Asia Foundation, and then John Doerr and Kunratmini at DFAT for their support in making this report happen and guidance along the way. Really appreciate all of the think piece authors for their efforts, especially in a relatively short period of time to make this whole report come to be, and also for the discussants who have added their really valuable contributions to help us think through beyond the think pieces and hopefully have a momentum around this discussion. Within AMPES, the AMPES team has been really very key to make the report. And so as well as thanking Tarek, we thank Tarek's colleagues, including Khan, John Sorden, Tian Lee, and Pung Tran. And then within CSDS, my colleagues Orapan, Thierry, and Anissa, and then also Michael Medley, who helped with the proofreading of the report. And lastly, to thank all of the participants today that have contributed to this discussion. So thank you all. With that, I'd like to hand over to John Doerr for some concluding remarks.
Okay, colleagues, I'll be brief because time is just about beating us. Marvelous final remarks by Tarek and Carl. Thank you. It's a good forward agenda for this group, if they wish, and for others who may wish to join the group. Australian embassies in the Mekong region are pleased to be supporting this community of practice focused on and contributing to the energy transition. But as my colleague, Mr. Nam, mentioned, not all the think pieces share the same view, and that's okay. Not all the authors have the same vision for the energy transition, and that's okay. One intention of this is to learn more from each other so that we can all be more informed and effective in our day-to-day work. So thanks to you all for being so thoughtful and willing to share your ideas in writing at this particular moment in your careers. We will find a way to provide opportunity for this group to meet again in person before the end of 2022. Australia is committed to maintaining and strengthening our partnerships with colleagues like you all. While I've got the opportunity, I also want to share some recent news. Australia has a new government, most of you would know, following its federal election on 21 May. The new Australian government has committed to undertake an ambitious and constructive role in international efforts to combat the climate crisis. The new Australian government has committed to a more ambitious 2030 target to reduce emissions to a certain level, and they will enshrine this in law and will submit a new nationally determined contribution to the UNFCCC soon. Some people will understandably still want that target, the 2030 target, to be more ambitious. Some, of course, in any diverse society want it to be less ambitious, but I can let you know that the shift is very well underway. It was already underway at different levels, but a change in government has certainly shifted momentum. So we'll be supporting this ambition by introducing new emissions reductions policies while preparing Australia to become a clean energy leader. We'll be investing $20 billion to upgrade our own electricity grid. We'll be installing many more community batteries and solar banks across Australia, and we'll be investing in renewables manufacturing and the deployment of low emissions technologies and the development of new industries. The plan of the government is to have the portion of renewable energy in the Australian energy market increase to 82% by 2030. And there's a set of other steps that that we are committing to take to sort of achieve that. Finally, with a nod to more integrated thinking, as just mentioned by Carl, Canberra has announced yesterday that we will create a new Ministry of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water. In the Mekong, I think Australia has already largely moved to integrated climate, energy, water and environment planning in our sort of different programming that underpins our bilateral and regional relationships. But it's personally, it's very pleasing to see Canberra sort of shifting in this direction also. So again, thanks to Chula and CSDS. Thanks to Chula and CSDS. Thanks to AMPES, and on behalf of the embassy here in Bangkok, thanks to all of the authors and participants in this project. Best wishes.
Thank you so much, John. And with those concluding remarks, we now end the report launch. Thank you again, everyone, for joining today, and I hope that we'll meet again in person in the very near future.
Thank you. Goodbye.